So I'm trying to talk in a loud voice. Is this something? Can everyone hear that okay? Or do we need to go higher? Higher? Perfect. And I can adjust it as other people talk if we need to move it around. So I want to thank you guys all for coming out this evening. Last year we started this process of saying, let's have an after-session overview of how the process went, how sessions went, and then bringing all the voices of the county together to have that conversation. Because what happens in Cheyenne doesn't stay in Cheyenne. It affects all of us. It affects us every single day, good or bad. What passes or doesn't pass has direct impact on our lives. And so we have the opportunity today to talk to Senate, House, as well as county electeds. And I think this is just something I'm going to do as long as I'm in this position. We'll do it every year after sessions because I believe it's important for you guys to have the opportunity to ask questions as well as just kind of get an overview of what exactly is going on. So with that, if you guys wouldn't mind rising, we're going to start with pledge and prayer. So we're going to just start with prayer and then go into the pledge. So dear Heavenly Father, we just come today and we thank you for the opportunity to be together, to be a part of this amazing thing called government in America. God, I thank you that our founding fathers had the foresight to put together a constitution, a Bill of Rights, and a Declaration of Independence that have truly defined this great nation for hundreds of years. God, we don't take it lightly as we take that oath as elected officials. God, we have a duty to uphold that Constitution. So God, I just pray right now that as we come together this evening, that this would be a productive time, a time of conversation regarding the sessions, a time of understanding what it means to do people's work, God, and to talk about that. I just thank you for every person who's taking the time this evening to be here. I pray blessing as we go about our process, and I pray we bring honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen. And let's do a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out this evening. It's great to be here. I think this is a great idea for all of us to get together, and hopefully as it moves forward and becomes more of a tradition, we can fill the whole house and maybe we can look for bigger things. So that would be exciting. Taft Love, Wyoming Senate District 6. I was your appointed senator in September, so September the 9th of this year. I took over the Senate seat as Darren Smith was appointed to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Been quite an honor to serve this fall. I had to get 3 hours when the other legislators got 3 days of training. So LSO really enjoyed the idea that I had to cram it all in one afternoon in a very brief session. So I've enjoyed this position. I've enjoyed representing all of you. Truly an honor for me to do this. So thank you very much for your confidence, for all of you that were there, helped through the appointment process, and the commissioner's confidence and the unanimous vote. It's been quite an honor. So I'll dive right in. As a freshman, I guess it's unusual to get a bill passed, and I managed to pull it off. So we did get Senate File 50 passed, was my one sponsored bill. That's the State Engineer Surface and Groundwater Study. That study is to make up for the AMAC study that placed controls in Laramie, Platte, Goshen, and Niobrara County about 12 years ago. And so that dictates a lot what we do with irrigation wells, stock wells, old wells, residential spacings, all of those things. It's been dictating a lot of what we have going on in the water world for this southeast corner. So this will update that information. As it updates that information, our hope is that we can drive down housing costs because we're going to look at new technologies with it. So we've got water and sewer districts, and those water and sewer districts, we can actually shrink the size of the lots that we're building on That way we're not sprawling out around Cheyenne. Cheyenne's starting to look like a front range rapidly. And it's because we're going 5.25 acres at a time, because that's what's been dictated by the previous water study. We have new technologies today in water and waste that are going to make us way more efficient. We'll actually use way less water and go to much tighter spacing. So we're pretty excited about the opportunity. And that could also help and slow down the evaluation increase that we've seen in properties as well over time, because more residential properties in southeast Wyoming have just skyrocketed in cost in the last 5 years. So pretty excited about the possibilities of that bill. Laramie County is also in a complete moratorium for irrigation wells, and so I'm hoping this is going to help free up some water for that as well. So it could be huge for agriculture. Senate File 57 was a health insurance and cost transparency. So transparency in hospital services and pricing. That bill's also big. So we have two big issues in Wyoming right now with health insurance and with property insurance. So everybody's property insurance has gone up, doubled, tripled. I've got one property in mine that's quadrupled in cost to insure in the last 2 years. And it's because of the fire ratings that have been going on around the area. The other thing that we've done in this is we passed 6 bills. Jeremy was in some of the committees that helped pass these fire district bills. I was in the Ag Committee when we passed a couple as well. And we got all 6 of those across the line for the fire departments, the Forest Service for forest cleanup, to be able to reduce some of the fire and fuel loads that we have going on that are causing the drive in some of this risk. As far as that's going to a category 4 risk assessment 4 in our fire rating if you're outside of the 5-mile radius of the fire department. So do really good things. So the transparency in hospital services and all of those fire bills wrapped together are ultimately aimed at trying to reduce our health and insurance costs for residential properties, rural properties, and especially second residences for some people, I guess, are astronomical. I had a guy in Glendale telling me that he got his one quote he was able to get on his house in Glendale is $40,000 to insure that house for a year. That makes it pretty tough to move on. So next we had motor vehicle registration and plate issuance. Those are to speed up, and Platte County doesn't necessarily have this problem yet, but in a lot of our dense areas like Casper, Cheyenne, Wyoming, those areas are struggling. You're getting a number when you get there, you may be 4 hours to get to where you need to be and get business done. So these are going to allow for other opportunities to help speed up that process and make it easier. 2026 election hand count comparison. So these are all bills I was also a co-sponsor on. Senate File 113. So what this does is there were 2 or 3 different hand counts for elections that came through. We discussed these with our different county clerks. Malcolm was great. He was online with me when I needed help with some of these. As a former party chair, I also had to witness the machine calibrations and go through the testing process to vet those machines. We had issues in Laramie County with one of our machines. It went through an entirety of a process. Ultimately, we got certified before the election. The election went off good. Some of those races, though, came out really close. And so there's an idea that hand counts could be good at helping with this process or taking over the process, but some would like to see that happen. So this hand count option allows us to take those really tight races and say, why don't we just hand check this one and make sure the machine got it right. So it's a good option. Malcolm and the clerk seem to be on board with it, and so we passed it pretty easily as an election integrity bill. Keeping public lands protected, decisions local, so that was a Senate resolution. And so all the resolution is we didn't really pass the bill. We agreed to author a letter as the Senate, and I believe it was ratified in the House. And that then goes to our DC representatives and senators and asks them to make sure that Wyoming has a shot at anything that's going to happen with federal lands inside of our state, because the majority of our state is federal lands. So it's pretty crucial that we have some input in that, just part of being good neighbors. There were several other bills that took place during the session as well that addressed some of the way our state lands function with us. And I know a couple of them going forward, we're actually looking as well at the state being able to take over some of the management of federal lands, which may be beneficial for us in the future as well. Keep that control a little more local could be great. House Bill 2, fast track permits. That bill made it across the line. It's also aimed at lowering housing costs to try to keep pushing back on some of those issues. House Bill 98, prohibit red flag gun seizures and penalties. And so this added 1 year and I believe a $2,000 fine onto illegal gun seizures. This is actually Jeremy's bill. He just asked me to co-sponsor. I was thrilled to do it, and we got it across the line. I think it's a great opportunity. Both of us pretty big on Second Amendment, so that was a good one. Just bolsters what we already had. House Bill 126 was the Human Heartbeat Act. So this was another shot. So when the Supreme Court decision came down on abortion, it essentially said that we went back to nothing. And so we didn't go back to what Wyoming had always did. We went back to probably the most liberal position Wyoming's ever seen in the abortion arena. And so this bill was to try to get us back to at least some point of, if this doesn't work and the Supreme Court bats this down, then we default back to our original setting and not back to nothing. And so I think this is a really good start. I think Jeremy and I are both on this bill. But it's another crack, and it will be challenging and important. It'll be interesting to see how that one comes out. It will be exciting though if we end up back where Wyoming's always been instead of nothing. So House Bill 92, sexual predators prohibited from public office. This is another bill. So this is something that I also witnessed as a county chairman. We had a guy who was on the registered sex offenders list run for a school board position now at Wyoming County Community College. And there's supposed to be felonies that prevent this from happening, but it didn't. And so Dallas Terrell and myself went out, we made a campaign, we got this stopped. We were able to keep this person off the ballot for the last election cycle. So we passed this law so that everybody gets put against the registered sex offender list before they're allowed to run for public office. We don't need people like that having access to our children and some of our most precious resources. So I was very glad that we were able to get that bill across. House Bill 78, the Forest Health Grant Program, kind of rolled that into the earlier discussion about insurance. And so that's one of the forest programs that came through agriculture. And then Jeremy's committee took care of a lot of the other fire bills that came through. I think it all went pretty well. We also had Senate Vote Lightning Grant, Senate File 123, Wyoming Energy Dominance Fund. This is something that the White House is pushing. JAC had also run a loan of $16 million for the Upton Rare Earth. And in that process, then, as things transformed and the Senate went back to the governor's rec, I then ran an amendment to put that $16 million back in. After discussing with the White House and national security and some of the other things going on, Wyoming's really a big part of this race for national security against China. And so these rare earth minerals, and we have a deposit right off the county line here in Platte County, and hopefully we can help make this translate down here as well. But making sure that we're able to produce, process, and get these out in time to win that race is going to be very vital, because we're way behind in the rare earth minerals and energy dominance issue. So we were glad to get that done. JAC then in, actually the House and the Senate in JCC. So JAC, Joint Appropriations Committee, they make an original recommendation, the governor makes a recommendation, each House and Senate take their own positions, and then they come together with JCC, and in JCC then they debate between the two positions and ultimately come out with a bill that gets passed and goes on to the governor. And so in that 16 million survived through that in a JCC amendment and went on to be approved and signed by the governor. In total, we took on, the Senate passed 7 veto overrides, one of which was the Wyoming Business Council, I believe. We had it as 1 year of funding, $14.3 million, and it ended up the governor vetoed the 1 year, made it 2 years of funding, which makes it even more difficult on the Business Council. Their payroll for the year is $11.86 million for a biennium, so 6.43 for a year. And so their total budget for 2 years is $14.3 million. And so they're on a pretty short leash until we get things lined out. I know Jeremy's on JAC and minerals committees are going to be part of the drivers that help restructure that going forward. The other thing that was huge for us as a 10-year school board member, for the first time since I can remember, since I took the first school board position in 2012, we passed school recalibration. That year was the last year of the previous recal, which was 5 years prior. And so, for the first time, we are constitutionally compliant in every way. And in fact, I believe we're $15 million overfunded from the recommendation. And schools have all of the funding necessary to move forward. What did happen in this process, though, was we siloed the education portion. And in doing that, we want to aim most of this money at the education side. So our teachers, resources for classrooms, making sure we've got the right tutors, comparison, making sure our class sizes are smaller. What was happening before is we might fund a school district for 150 teachers, and they would hire 130. And then the other $2 million roughly that they saved on those 20 teachers would go somewhere else. And so going somewhere else, and we never could nail down where. And they said that it was ghost positions is what they were called. Those ghost positions ended up being elementary school counselors, which weren't in the funding model. There were extra pairs that needed to be there. Special ed and SPED, where they were trying to say that's covered in a whole different area of the budget. And so what we pass as a state is handled in the direct funding of the school district. The federal government then gives us an additional, I think it's almost $400 million for SPED programs and those federal programs, food assistance programs. And so what we did is we focused that money on the education in the classroom kids. And we kept the admin side of it separate. We also did direct funding back to school districts for the insurance, for health insurance. So 100% of the state rate for health insurance is what districts get funded. The other thing that we did is then the admin is where a lot of the cuts come from, because what we were witnessing is we're 45% admin heavy in school districts and 55% on the education side. And so we're trying to grow the education side, focus the dollars where they're supposed to be, and that's on the kids. And so the admin side's gotten a little more uncomfortable, I guess you would say. Ultimately, as we move away from the federalization of education, which happened in 78 and 79, in that year we were ranked #1 in the world for education. Today we rank 27th. Our president has seen fit to remove the Department of Education and put that back in the hands of the states where it was in 78 and 79. And so with that opportunity, we get to re-envision what a state-run education system looks like. And I think this was the legislature's first crack at saying, okay, we're going to get right, we're going to get funded, we're going to be constitutional in every way. And we're going to give you some ideas of what our expectations are. But now, the next reaction that has to happen is the Department of Education has to get these rules right as we move forward. So districts are trying to make decisions, and I've talked to your school board, both here and in Jersey. they are trying to make decisions on imperfect information because we don't have all the rules established. And so that's the next big push, is to make sure as the Department of Ed comes out with a statement of idea, that they know what all the rules are based on this new outcome. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable for all of us as we learn what this looks like moving forward. The big possibility, though, is that we have a new vision for education that could make our public schools better than we've seen them in a long time. So I think I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Taft. I appreciate it. So kind of just a format, just so everyone's aware. We're going to talk legislation first. We're going to go through each of the different county electeds, and then at the end we'll have a question and answer time, so people can ask questions. So it's a 20-day session. So the sessions that happen in the Wyoming Legislature is a 40-day session and a 20-day session. We run on a biennium. And that biennium concept, we run a 2-year budget, we run a 2-year cycle, and so we're in the second of those 2 years. What does that mean? That means there's going to be more campaign signs in the walls. That's what that really means. Everyone in the House runs again. Taft will be running again if he chooses to. And it's important to remember that because this 2-year cycle is kind of the heartbeat of the legislative process. And so what does the budget look like and what does that mean? The first week of December, we went into a 2-week agency hearing period, which at that point we took the governor's budget. So all the agencies go to the governor, they give them their recommendations for their next biennial budget. The governor then goes through their recommendation and he basically line items in or out their requests. That then goes into the governor's budget. So we were given $11.1 billion biennial governor's budget. It's the largest budget that we've ever had. And you might ask the question, why is that? There's a couple reasons for that. One, it costs more to buy tires, or anything for that matter. We are just at a point where historically we've not seen inflation to this point. So there's that aspect. The other aspect is this. We had, through COVID, literally billions of dollars come into the state in federal funds that propped up programs and systems that then, when the funding ran out, there was the question of how do we continue to keep the machine moving and rolling, and do we keep these going? So that $11.1 billion budget, one thing you have to understand, since 2019, pre-COVID, we've seen a 59% increase in the budget of the state of Wyoming. Let that sink in. Since 2019, 59% increase. The inflationary numbers don't align with the 59% increase. And a big part of why we've had a 59% increase is when you start seeing $1 billion here and $400 million there in federal funds that backfills the system. And the reality is the government ratchets, right? It doesn't ever slide backwards, it only ratchets one way. And so going into this year, in that December hearing period, we listened to the agencies and their requests in January, first 2 weeks of January, we went into the actual process of what is called markup. The markup on the budget started that second week of January, and out of that 2-week period of markup, we came and did a number of things. One, we separated all capital construction out of the budget. And why is that? Constitutionally, we are required to pass a budget that oversees the operation of government. Well, capital construction is not operation of government, it's actual capital construction. And so we said those should stand on their own and do their own conversation. So we separated out CapCon for government buildings and CapCon for school facilities. So those are two separate bills that walk through the process. And then the other thing we did is we separated out the money for the rural health grant program, the rural health program that came from the One Big Beautiful Bill. Once again, we're going to see about $1 billion, just over $1 billion, come to the state of Wyoming over the next 3 years from this program from the federal government to advance rural health. one of the things that's important to understand is that if you put $1 billion, inject $1 billion in 5 years into the state of Wyoming, we're going to get daycares. And we all know what I mean when I say that. We're going to get fraud. We're going to get bad actors that are going to come in because they see dollar signs and they'll do dumb things to get dollars. And so what we're doing right now, and we're actually currently, as we speak, fighting with the federal government on the opportunity for us to take those funds and actually set them aside into an account that would have a 30-year run out, where it would be more of an IV drip into this health. Especially since we are very limited in what we can use it on. We can't sit there and rebuild broken facilities or do things of that nature. There's a thin window of what we can use it for, and it would not work. It would be a broken system. So those are the things we pulled out. So what that did is it shifted the budget numbers a little bit right out of the gate, simply because we didn't cut those. We just took them out of the budget numbers and let them stand on their own. After everything was said and done, JAC budget after that 2 weeks was $480 million less than the governor's recommendation. So $480 million is how we came to the floor last month. We went through and had a conversation. Senate and House had conversations. We both have the same amount of opportunity to see the budget, hear the budget, bring amendments to the budget, and change that budget. So the Senate side had, I think, roughly 60 some odd amendments in the course of 72 amendments in the course of two readings, and the House had 247. We did 93 hours that week on the budget. It was brutal to be an understatement, actually. We got done Saturday evening late, and it was a brutal run. But through that process, this budget's been worked on more than any other budget in the history of the state. How we came out was the House budget position was $170 million below governor's rec. Senate was $1.4 million above governor's rec. And the JCC, which is that joint conference committee of the two houses, came together and ended up $143 million below governor's recommendation. What does that mean? What does that look like? Off of that original $480 million cut, some of the things that got put back in. One was the University of Wyoming's funding. So the current funding for University of Wyoming is intact. Why does that mean? Let's have that conversation. I've had a lot of people say, why would you look at cutting $40 million from the University of Wyoming? That's roughly about 4% of their funding. And the conversation goes back to, as joint appropriations, our job is to look at the funding in the state and ask questions. That's our job. And some people don't agree with that or like that, but the reality is that's what our job is. We go and ask the questions. With that question conversation, when you look at it, the University of Wyoming is sitting at about a 3.5 to 1 students to administrator ratio. It's the highest of any land-grant college in the Midwest. And it's actually quite a bit higher, I think, than any other land-grant college. Now, that's not a make or break. It's just a conversation point. The other thing is, as a land-grant college, education and engineering are the three main functions or focuses of a land-grant college. If you look at the money spent out over the last decade in that university, you're going to see that those three areas actually got kind of forgotten. The other thing is this: if you want, you can go right now and you can take a minor in gender studies at the University of Wyoming, a course study that we had been guaranteed was no longer being offered at a publicly funded university. And so these are just some of the conversation pieces we had moving forward. The other thing that we had moving forward was the fact that if we go and we look at the projected fiscal policy or fiscal outlook of the state when it comes to educational funding, we did pass a school recalibration, which is awesome, but it put us into a position where we are going to be, right now, I haven't checked it since oil went up, and so that's changed. That's a good thing, right? But we are currently looking at having about a $600 million deficit 2 bienniums out. And why is that? Because the model for education is outpacing the income. We're already backfilling education, and we will continue to backfill education as long as the LSRA stays over $500 million. If the LSRA drops below $500 million, we no longer have a statutory obligation to fund education fully. If we get to that point, that is a wheels off the bus situation for the state of Wyoming. And we need to be very careful to do that. So everyone says, oh, we've got $30-some-odd billion. We don't have any issues. Those are constitutionally protected as funds that cannot be touched. The only thing we can touch is the interest income off of it. And so you might say, well, we have all this money. Well, the majority of all that money is locked into permanent accounts. And that is so that we have to live within our means. And that's a good thing until our means outrun our ability to fund it. And then we start asking questions like, what's the next steps? And so when it's all said and done, this budget was, in essence or technically, about a 1% cut in state spending. The Wyoming Business Council did go in under a microscope. It is funded in the realm that it has the ability to pay its employees and to continue to keep its doors open, but it will be brought before JAC as an interim topic this year to look at why the Wyoming Business Council kind of lost its vision of 1997, which was find the assets of a community and then find businesses that need those assets. That was what its original intention was, and in 2005 it became a funding model, and since then it's become more funding than it has actually finding businesses and bringing them in. Last year they came to us and bragged in December that they last year spent $1.2 million on every job they created. I'm going to let that sink back. $1.2 million on every job that was created last year through the Wyoming Business Council. That was their own information. That's what they gave to us and bragged to us about. And we scratched our head and said, that's alarming. And we also asked, well, what do you need? What do you truly need to be able to do your job? And they said, well, we need $1 billion. Why would you need $1 billion? Well, because that's what the issues are in the state. And we said, why don't we look at the metrics of why we're making these decisions, and let's get back into a position where we understand where we're at. We have no control over the amount of employees in the Wyoming Business Council. They're AWAC positions underneath the governor. We found out at that meeting they have 40 to 45 AWAC positions. As we already heard, roughly $14 million on the biennium to pay their salaries. And the CEO of this agency, which I didn't know we had CEOs of agencies, but we do, makes $288,000 every single year. Is that a problem in and of itself? Maybe not, but I think there's a point where when we are talking about $1.2 million per job, we have to start asking the question if it's actually doing what it was originally intended to do back when it was founded. So with that, we've already taken too much time. We have a lot to talk about. We've got opportunities to talk more and more, and I would love to talk more and more about what we did this year. But kind of some of the highlights. We passed a budget that funded government in a way that I feel is incredibly fair. We passed a school recalibration bill, something that has not been done in 20 years, 15 years we've been out of recalibration. And we had an opportunity to see some really good legislation make it through. And we got to see an opportunity for a lot of good legislation not to make it through and die, which is something that needs to be addressed and we need to figure out moving forward. And some of the petty differences that we got to see about was sad and didn't need to happen. And so we're going to definitely continue to work on that as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our good county commissioners and let them talk a little bit about the county and where the status of the county is.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for organizing this event. It's good to see all these people and have a chance to visit about some of the things that are going on in the county. As far as the legislative session, I think the most significant thing for Platte County, or for at least the commissioners, was making direct distribution permanent. In the past, it was just kind of at the whim of the legislature whether it was funded or not. And then if it was funded, we never knew exactly how much it was going to be funded. So that has been made permanent Last year, we brought in 766,000 on direct distribution, so it's a significant portion of the budget. And I think it's 8% of the state's sales and use tax will go to direct distribution. You divide it up between counties, towns, and cities. And I know we were all pulling for that. The other thing that I was hopeful for was the conversation on consensus fund. I think that was one of the best programs that there ever was. When I was first a commissioner, the legislature would fund what they called consensus funds, and then a certain amount of money would go to the towns and the county, and then we would sit down together with the mayors of each town. We would decide amongst ourselves. Basically, we got to hear everybody's problems, and those were really good meetings that we used to have. And then they kind of ended that program that they're talking about bringing back, and I think that would be a really good thing to bring that back.
Steve, if you don't mind, I'll talk about that.
Sure.
So the consensus grants, the county consensus grants, and they are specifically going towards infrastructure. And one of the struggles we have, town of Wheeler has it, the county has it, everything's getting older. We're finding that there are federal regulations that we have to abide by that are problematic. And so our thought process and the conversation we had is if the Wyoming Business Council really wants to do something for business, let's make our communities able to be healthy and vibrant for business. And so it's really hard to bring a business in when you don't have electrical, sewer, water, storm drains, curb and gutter, good roads. And so those are things that the county consensus grants, and that's the conversation moving. Because when we start throwing around $60, $70 million that we can put into 23 counties and 99 municipalities, that's incredibly important when it comes to like sewer ponds and water towers and 16th Street projects and stuff like that.
And the nice thing about it is it came to the local governments. We got to decide which projects, to precedence. Like, Wheatland might have an issue with the water system. The town of Chudwater might have some street problems. Guernsey might have electrical problems. And the way we always did it is everybody laid out their needs on the table. And the county might have said, well, we're in pretty good shape. You guys take all our money this time, and the next time around it will be the other way around. So it worked really well. You got to work with everybody, to see what everybody's challenges are. So, outside of the legislative session, the planning and zoning commission department has been real busy. There seems to be a lot of interest in subdivisions. We seem to approve the subdivision almost every meeting. Simple subdivisions, the larger 35-acre subdivisions, there's a lot of interest in that. The wind and solar project down at Chudwater, they just, I think it was yesterday, it was determined that their application for that project was complete, so that'll be working its way through the planning commission, eventually come to the commissioners. Road and Bridge has been doing a lot of work on looking at the roads and we're finding that we're maintaining roads that we don't have easements on, not maintaining roads that we do have easements on. So we're going to work on a plan to try to slowly get those worked out. Jeff and Tony have been working together on a renovation for the one lodge at the jail. It's desperately needed, and we set aside some money in our budget for it last year. But we also said, if the revenue from the jail is going to come in good, then we'll probably do more than what we had planned. And right now, I think Tony and his crew are on track to earn about $1 million in revenue from the detention center this year. So we're able to do some renovations to the lodge over there. And a lot of these things have been kicked down the road, didn't have the money to do them. And so as time goes on, it was more cost of the year long. So we decided, once we vacate that lot, we're gonna try to do as much as we can, and, to bring it back up into condition so that it meets the standards for the federal entities that come in this one. We're also working on a project to redo the HVAC in the Coleman building. It was kind of put together piecemeal at a time, it looks like, from when we bought the building. The furnaces are from the 70s and they're not efficient at all. There's a lot of ductwork that might not go anywhere. So we're going to work on that. The courthouse renovation project is going to kick off for the exterior. You should start seeing some activity around the courthouse. Some of the entrances that you know now may be closed for construction. That project is all exterior. It involves repointing the brick on the exterior of the courthouse and working on the roof. We had some damage out of the place from late spring storm, which probably everybody's had some damage from the late spring storm. So we're looking at that. And other than that, it's pretty much business as usual. So yeah, I get that.
Talking about that Coleman building, I spent about 4 hours over there with that guy who popped up, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 ceiling tiles and mapped out the way that ductwork was in there. And their supply lines going into an office, and the return in that office may go to a different furnace. And none of it makes any sense. It's an antique old, what we used to call rag duct. It doesn't flow, you can't clean it. And you can go in one of those nurses' offices that is 72 degrees, and you go in the one right next to it and it's 65 degrees. That doesn't mean that, plus we're spending, way more money on, fuel and whatnot, and electricity because of the efficiency of these things from the 70s are probably 30% bad. So as Steve referred to, that can't be kicked down the road far enough. We've got to start taking care of that because they're people, it's not a warehouse. And, they deserve better than that. Going back to that jail plot, I toured that. Never seen anything quite like that, in all the years of the scribbling on the walls and the this and that and whatnot. And, we're not going to turn it into Ramada Inn for these guys. That's not what we're after, but it does have to meet the standards that Tony has to meet to house federal inmates. That's the direction we're going there.
My name is Malcolm Urban. I'm the county clerk. I'll be quick and really defer time to questions. I think that's more productive. But I'm going to rattle through a bunch of dates for you, so get your planners out. And if you forget these, go back to YouTube and review it. Before that, I should have mentioned when Commissioner Baker said he'd never seen anything like that jail pod. Just congratulations on being in jail. I don't know if anybody caught that little point, but
We let it out, so it's
yeah. So, a couple of dates to keep in mind. First, with elections. Primary election is August 18th. The general election is November 3rd. Filing for office for the primary election. So, for all partisan offices, county commissioners, there's 2 up, county clerk, assessor, treasurer, sheriff, all of those, state senate, state representative, those will be May 14th through the 29th. The same is true for municipal offices who run their election concurrent with us. And so the town of Wheatland, the town of Guernsey, Chugwater, their filing period will be the same, May 14th through the 29th. So for Wheatland, there's a mayor, 2 councilmen. For Guernsey, a mayor, 2 councilmen. And for Chugwater, they have 2 councilmen. And so that filing period is May 14th through the 29th. For special districts, fire districts, school boards, there's a ton of positions available. And you'll see a proclamation of election first week of May. It'll be on the county website. It'll be in the county courthouse. filing for special districts. So again, school boards, fire districts, that will be August 5th through the 25th. Changing path just a little bit, the county's budget hearing, I know I'm a little early, but July 7th at 10 a.m. we'll have the county budget hearing. Of course, leading up to that, we'll have a number of workshops and a number of meetings to talk about the fine details, but the 7th is really the opportunity to provide that public comment on record of what you want to see, don't want to see, and then the commissioners have 24 hours after that in order to ratify a budget. And so, again, July 7th will be that budget hearing. So those are the dates I wanted to throw at you fairly quickly. Again, there will be a proclamation first week of August. If you don't want to run for election, there are other very important things you can do. You can serve on a board. The county commissioners, they appoint a number of boards to include, they have a vacancy right now on their Housing Authority Board. That's what runs the housing on 16th Street right next to Baumgart's. A lot of people don't know the county actually owns that and then delegates the duty of managing those to a board. We have a vacancy right now. On April 1st, we'll have a vacancy on our hospital foundation board. And so planning and zoning board will be appointed in June, fair board. There are a lot of opportunities to be involved in a non-political setting. And so if serving in an elected life isn't what you're after, but you still want to serve, boy, do we have some opportunities. And looking at our friends in the town of Wheatland, I know that they're looking for volunteers as well. I saw a thing earlier today that said 10% of people do 90% of the work. And so let's up that 10% and serve on some of those boards. And so I just want to say thank you for putting this together. And quick little aside, thank you to both Senator Love, Representative Haroldson. During the session, it was very nice to be able to communicate about concerns, issues, and I just really appreciate that receptiveness. Senator Love talked about Senate File 113, which will require a hand audit after the primary and general election. So we'll conduct 3 post-election audits now as opposed to 2. With some really quick work, but I think got to a pretty decent spot. Really appreciate Representative Haroldson's ear on a number of issues. Of course, him being on Joint Appropriations Committee, the county's got a vested interest in what that committee kicks out, right? And so really appreciate both of them and all of my colleagues. Jeremy didn't do it, so I will. And he wanted to, but he's a better guy than me. I really want to just say thank you to Treasurer Riggs. Jeremy asked if he could celebrate her. She said no because she's too doggone humble. I'm just going to beg for forgiveness. She actually has worked there since the building was built, right? I think they built it around your desk. But a really tremendous testament to public service. 28 years, it'll be 29 years in full-time service. And then, of course, how many years of part-time? She'll get to it, but thank you, Christy, for all of your work for the people.
It's really nice of him to lead me out with that. I can't talk about it. So, just reiterate with everybody else, thank you for putting this together. Thank you, Christy, for the time. I mean, I look at it as, you know, I've been with the county this be almost 20 years now, and Christy, I don't know how you've done it. I love her public service, but yeah, it's a lot. It was a lot. You know, everybody else has notes. I just kind of sat up here. So, a lot of, it doesn't matter, it's good. So, I think I like everybody else at this table. Did a lot of watching the sessions now, which I pretty much had my headphones in as I walked around and then sat at the table. And it was a lot. It was a lot. And kudos to these gentlemen for doing what they did for the state and the county. You know, it's always been a compliment to me when somebody says they're doing your job, I'm doing your job. You guys did a good job. I'm completely unprepared. So I'm just gonna say, Jeb, we did let him out. He didn't throw a fight. We're good. But there's massive renovations needed. And it's disheartening to be in there. Like you said, we're not gonna be making the risk, you know, or Hilton or anything like that for those people, but they deserve the right to have a clean place to stay. And the fact that we got that way won't happen. That's ridiculous. But moving forward, take care of the stuff you have. My job is to give folks the best product that I can give y'all while spending the least amount of money. And by gosh, I plan on giving you guys the best product you can get. All right, everybody has a right to feel safe. So we're gonna do what we can with what we have, and we're gonna give you the best that there is. We want people to walk around and say Platte County's got the best sheriff's office. So, folks, that's all I got for you. Waiting for questions, so we'll send them down the road.
I'm Danette Knuckle. I'm the Platte County assessor. My topic is not fun, property taxes. Nobody likes those. I'll try to keep mine brief as well. I do appreciate our legislators. I've said it numerous times. I do not envy your job. You guys have to cram so much information about a lot of topics and make really important decisions. So thank you guys very much for doing that. You guys have worked really hard to try to find property tax relief bills that is a one-size-fits-all, which I think we know is not really an option. What works in Platte County doesn't work in Teton County or even Campbell County, and so we appreciate your efforts to try to find something that does offer property tax relief for those people that really need it. There was a lot of property tax bills that were put out, but not many made it to the finish line. House Bill 45 did make it, and that was to extend the long-term homeowners exemption. It was set to sunset in 2026, but that was repealed, and so it'll carry on in perpetuity. The application due date on that did change from the fourth Monday in May to March 1st, starting in 2027. So this year, you can still get your application in if you qualify by the fourth Monday in May, but by next year, it'll be the deadline of March 1st. The homeowners exemption is also the deadline of March 1st. In 2025, the bill came out and everybody got a 25% reduction on their residences, regardless of whether or not it's rental, if you owned it, everybody got 25% off starting in 2026, and that is only being applied to people that qualify and came in and applied for it, well, they didn't come in, it was an online application. So, there's that, and then I guess the only other thing I would touch base on is there's going to be on the ballot this year, there's going to be the ballot for the People's Initiative. And it's very similar to a couple of the other ones that we have in place, but it's going to be 50% off of your residence. It does not include associated land. The long-term homeowners and the homeowners exemptions currently do, so there's a difference in there. You have to be a state resident for 1 year. So be prepared for that. Any questions you guys would have, you're always welcome to come in our office just to discuss what those differences may or may not look like.
My name is Christy Ritz, and I'm honored to serve as your county treasurer. Thank you earlier. I can't overstate that the best part of my job is the people I work with and I work for. And so I just appreciate those people that are associated with Platte County. Thank you, Representative Haroldson, for organizing this event. Everyone has touched on pretty much everything that affected the treasurer's office property tax bills. We did the collection, but the assessment falls on the side. But I did want to take just a minute to talk about two things about your license plates that we got a lot of questions on this year. And these two guys are the ones that you'd actually direct those questions to. Because the way our license fees are figured is based on state statute. Each county does not set their fees. The legislature does per statute. Right now, our depreciation schedule is 6 years. They did look at the bill that would have extended that to an 8-year. What that means is what you were paying for your 2012 Chevy Malibu in 2018 is the exact same that you're paying for it today. And so when they go ahead and look at that, one thing we want to keep in mind is the way our county fee portion is distributed is exactly the same percentage as our property taxes are. So if they do lower those, then it means better things for our pocketbook, but then your special districts, your towns, your municipalities, the county, we all see that as well. The other thing that was sort of controversial in my office, which I didn't expect quite so much, was the change in the license plate, the look at it. And I was just going to tell you briefly that how they go ahead and do that is WIDOT has a committee that goes ahead and decides what that's going to be. It's also based on state statute that right now they have to change it every 8 years, and that's a lot to do with how long the reflectiveness of the material lasts. But they also looked at a bill this year that would get rid of that 8-year time period. So those things, you guys are the drivers of these. Your legislatures listen to you, and if you feel passionately about any of these, I suggest you reach out to me and you reach out to them. So I appreciate you all being here tonight. We appreciate you taking time on your own schedule to come listen to us.
Thank you, guys. So real quick, one of the things I want to talk about is I think there's an education piece that needs to be brought in. I get a lot of people who say, my property tax keeps going up. The state has $30 billion in their accounts. This is just nonsense. You have to understand that property tax doesn't go to the state. Property tax doesn't go to the state. Property tax goes to the county. And I think you need to understand that. Direct distribution, sales and use tax, a portion of it, 8% now goes to the counties and municipalities. Why is that important to understand? Because you need to understand where the money is coming from and where it's going to. And so a big part of the property tax push that we've had, obviously coming out of COVID, we saw property tax go through the roof. In Platte County, way less than a lot of other places, but still in Platte County, we saw an increase. And so there have been measures to bring relief for that. There are people who saw hundreds of percents worth of increase to their property tax in the state. Now, Platte County wasn't that, but it still was an increase. And so one of the things I think we need to just keep in mind as we think of reducing that tax with the 50% ballot initiative or the 25%, you gotta understand that you can't have both sides. And so those are the conversations we need to have, and we're going to get real numbers of what those look like for our county. And then we all need to make the decision, because we again, you can't have it both ways. If you want your road graded, if you want the culvert put in, if you want the chip sealing done, if you want those things taken care of, it takes money to do that. So there's just a give and a take. And I'm not telling you how to vote on it at all. I just want to make sure everyone's fully aware of what that means and what that looks like when the county commissioners look at their budget, or our special districts like our fire departments and weed and pest and those county funds come through the property tax predominantly. And so we'll just keep that in mind, and we'll make sure we get you guys some information on that. Yes.
And I just want to add a little finer point on the property tax distribution. And so about 18% of your property tax payment goes to the county itself. The treasurer collects it all, but then she disperses it to entities. The largest portion goes to schools, about 18% to the counties, then to municipalities, your special districts like your senior citizen district, fire districts. All of those are separate entities, and they are receiving a portion of those property taxes. So just to make that clear, And when we talk about that reduction, I do want to go back a little bit to something Representative Bill said earlier. Haroldson said, it's kind of a mouthful, but when he talks about the legislative stabilization reserve account, LISRA, that if it drops below 500 million, public education is required to be backfilled by the state. And so with property tax reduction, of course, there's more pressure on LISRA to fill that backfill, and so that puts more pressure on it, nearing that $500 million mark. So I just wanted to make that clear that about 18% goes to the county. The remainder of property tax, not 1% goes to the state. It goes to school districts, county, municipalities, and special districts.
Okay, we're gonna open up that opportunity for people to ask questions, and what I would say is, because we obviously have a lot of different representation here for a lot of different conversations. So if you have a question, I would just ask that you would say, I'd like to ask one of our legislators, or I'd like to ask one of our county officials. That way we can kind of at least get a lane that we're running in. So if anyone has a question, raise a hand, and we might go over to you, and we'll start answering. And I figure we've got, I mean, we can talk for the next hour on questions, so.
Hello, I'm Kelly Kennedy. This is kind of direct sheriff. And I'm not picking on you at all. Who I'm picking on is the brand respect, the brand board. We've had, Tyler Clinton had 14 replacement efforts sold this year. His dad had 15 cows sold last year. They've never contacted your office, so we can get a whole seat true. And maybe because he has not done anything. We went to the last board meeting up there and talked to him, and he has not even returned a phone call. It's just ridiculous. If you aren't informed, if the people in this room aren't informed, who's going to be informed? So I would like to try to straighten this out and stop this, please.
You got it, absolutely. Sorry. So part of what we have done is we have kind of an MOU signed, a little bit of a contract signed with the livestock authorities. So that my deputies can get out there and go be more places present, you know, they're gonna try to help that out. So that, I gotta send them to a training group. So that should be next month, they should all be trained. But even at that, I want my guys to be out on their roads and I'm gonna talk to the farmers branding, right? I think that alone, if people are gonna do dumb things, I'm not as eloquent as everybody else, but if people are gonna do dumb things, if they have to look over their shoulder to see if the cop is there, it might make them think twice. So that's my first step in that, but the second step is definitely getting to, you know, getting out there to help guys. Like you said, if I don't know it, it sure as heck can't fix it. And that's something it's absolutely ridiculous. And honestly, if it comes down to the lifetime, we're not getting back to you. Call my office directly. We'll go help you out.
Thank you.
So first of all, I'd like to say thanks for everything. I'm Ann Harris, and my question or comment more is addressed to all the people who spend all money and who are in charge of money. Because whenever you talk about consensus grants, I think that there's an important piece of stewardship that also needs to be considered. Clearly, Jeb knows about HVAC, and so I'm going to assume that whatever contract you guys sign, it's going to be done right the first time. Because I think about 16th Street, and I drove down that beautiful new pavement like twice before all of a sudden it was torn up again. And there were things that had to be fixed that I don't understand why it wasn't why some of these issues weren't anticipated. And the fact that you're climbing up a grade to get into the Safeway parking lot also feels like that's something, and that's probably more of a city thing, but just make sure that you're doing the work right the first time. And I don't know if that's the contracts and the engineers and all that stuff. It seems like there should be some checks and balances to make certain that before we sign on the dotted line, we do the work, we get the work right. And then my question for the commissioners or for Malcolm was on the 8% of the sales tax. Is that sales tax that's collected in the county?
I think that's the sales tax that's collected in the county. For the state's portion of the sales
The
tax.
state's portion of sales, collected in the county, not like 8% of the whole state sales.
So, and prior to this session, the first 4% of sales tax that were paid, about 69% was remitted to the state of Wyoming. About 31%, was sent to counties to be distributed to special districts, municipalities, on that same schedule like I talked about earlier. Now, I think it's July 1, 61% of those first 4% will go to the state, and then the remaining 39% will be distributed to localities.
Thank you, thank
A
you.
lot of percentages.
And then one more question for the legislators. You talked about 59% budget increase from COVID era to now. So are there new programs that were started during that era that could now be sunsetted since we're not really dealing with COVID in the same way?
Absolutely. I'll back into that.
So, thank you for answering the questions, and I'll first, and I can't really mention for 16th Street, and the town wants to have a conversation about that. One of the things that I will say is when I first started the conversation on 16th Street, we were gonna go from Maverick all the way to Sinclair, and we were gonna do that for under $10 million. And when we got done, and I don't know what it currently is, but last I had heard, we're putting $15 million to go and do what we did. And so one of the struggles that we're finding is in the middle of that planning process, we saw this kind of just runaway inflationary curve. And so in a way, we lost our buying power. And so I think that with that came some of those things that we've seen. We couldn't do all the things we wanted to do, so some of it was patching in because we couldn't do all the things financially. And we were at a point, we need to start moving this project where we're going to really find ourselves in trouble because it keeps running faster than we can raise money for. And so that's a concern, and I'll make it speak more. In regards to the process, we did an audit, well, I guess not an audit. We did a working group with the Department of Health, biggest budget in the State's Department. And it's at $3.1 billion by year. And with that, we put together a working group because we wanted to look at what's truly needed, what's truly needing the cut, and why have we seen the Department of Health go from a $600 million budget to a $3.1 billion budget in the last 20 years. And when we looked at it, and we put people like Ken Pendergraft, who is probably one of he's a penny pinching dude, that guy, right? We put them together, and what they came to the end of it is anytime we looked at something, everything in the Department of Health is federal match-based stuff. So we pay 50%, the feds pay 50%. We pay 75%, or 25% the feds pay 75%. And with that, they started looking at some programs we pulled here because maybe this isn't so needed. And what they found is when they pulled this here, this sucked in on it. Because what the feds have done is they've interwoven every single thing having to do with Medicaid and Medicare together, and they hook systems or processes into each other. So you might take and say, we want to lower this amount for something that we might not think is desperately needed, but it's directly attached to in-home care for seniors. Well, if you cut in-home care for seniors, it's $8,000 to $9,000 to put someone in a nursing home, and it's $175 a month to keep them in their home, make sure they get their pills taken, and they get a shower a couple times a week, and their bed gets turned out. Like, we're here to take care of them, right? $175 a week, or $8,000 to $9,000 for the nursing home. So we take and we go, we're going to cut this, that pulls in. And so where we're really at this point is, and one of the things we're pushing back on the federal government, one big thing Bill did a lot of help on this, and we need to continue to do that, is why are they so intertwined in that process? And so to answer the question, are there things that we can cut that are now in play? Some of this, a lot of the stuff that we saw through Wyoming Business Council were things that were brought in, and the grants and everything through some of that COVID money, the ARPA funds and that sort of stuff. That we did get rid of. That's where a lot of that $143 million cut came from, were those things. Are there more? We hope so. We hope we can continue to look for those. And as we look at the Wyoming Business Council, we're also looking at a cross-section of other things that we're funding in the realm of that going, is this needed? Is this the role of government? And should we continue?
All right, first of all, I'm Brooke Brockman. I don't know which hat you want me to wear tonight because I wear a lot of them, but first of all, I just want to say thank you. It is a hard job to be in public service, and all of you guys do a great job with the fact that you are here tonight, educating and providing updates to the community so we get a factual update rather than the ever and ongoing rumor mill that is part of any small community. I would also like to thank all of you that are here. It is, and no offense intended because I'm a mom, but it is a bit disappointing that our average age is probably over 50. So I guess my challenge to all of you that are here, please encourage the younger people to come because this is our community. Back to my point. Danette, this is mainly for you, but it also calls to Malcolm and the commissioners. In regards to the property taxes, I work closely with PCED, but what can we do as PCED and educated community members to help educate and provide a clear picture of what those taxes pay for? I think that's something that's going to be really important for this upcoming election. I don't want to pay any more taxes, but I've already paid my taxes this year. I chose to pay the whole amount. I have property in Goshen County. I chose to pay the whole amount because I know where they go. So I guess that is my question, is how can we, as a population, but also as an organization of PCED, help to educate and make some transparency for that?
Thank you for that question. It's a good question. Jeremy alluded to it earlier that education really is key. If you don't know where your taxes are going, then it probably makes you grumpy. You don't know what it's providing. Like Malcolm said earlier, the majority of your taxes go to schools and then the county, your special districts, and your towns. But for education, I'm always happy to go put on a presentation anywhere. This is where your taxes go. Outside of my office door, then there's something similar to this that breaks down a theoretical $250,000 house. This is how many tax dollars would go to each special district, town, county, library, etc. I'm happy to email things. I think having forums like this where we can talk about where those things go, get questions. But if you guys have functions that you want me to come speak at, I would be happy to do that. I think that's probably the best when you have a large population, so that way it's not just, like you said, the rumor mill of where all of your funds are going.
Would you send that to either myself or Josephine so that we can share that as much as possible and promote that just so that we are educated?
Yes, no, we have it.
I'm Sarah Taylor. Can I just speak to that special district's property tax thing a little in general? Is that okay? Okay, so I work for a special district, Wheaton Pest. I serve on a special district elected by the public, Platte County Senior Citizens Service District, and I serve as a secretary for the Wyoming Association of Special Districts. We, as an entity, the Wyoming Association of Special Districts, have a white sheet out, which is an informational document for the public to show what the detriment would be to vote for the tax cut versus what the benefit is. Again, not everybody wants to pay such a large amount of property taxes. It also explains where we are in the nation as far as ranking on the amount of property taxes we pay versus somewhere like Florida. Wyoming Legislature Pest Council also has a white sheet out there that explains all of this stuff too. But it affects so many things, like, for example, the fire department showing up at your house if it's burning down. Libraries, hospitals, all kinds of things. So it's just something to keep in mind. But if anybody has any questions about that, I am happy to share that white sheet with anybody who wants to see it.
Hi, I'm Jeff Stanfield. I'd just like to thank Christie and Tony Malcolm for making this the easiest county to do business in that I have ever lived in. You guys have been just super. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time here tonight to talk to us, and I really appreciate it. This is for the state legislatures. I wanted to just make a comment about the red flag law. I understand the Second Amendment rights are in Wyoming, but there's also the flip side of common sense laws, and I think it has to be discussed in the context of our suicide rate. Wyoming has the top. It's in the top 3 every year, consistently. Some people say it's the wind, which could add to it, but there's a correlation between suicide and being successful and having access to a gun. So I think, the red flag laws, which allow our law enforcement to use their judgment on whether to take away a gun, they're very important. So I just think we have to talk about that in context. And then this is probably a more controversial subject, but the anti-abortion law, I think you left out a little part of the history is a couple years ago, the state legislature actually engraved in the Constitution a right to make medical decisions. And that's why the court in Wyoming basically said your last law that you passed was unconstitutional. So the state legislature had a choice, and it passed another law, which as far as I can tell, is probably going to be overturned. But the other choice was actually to give the choice to the voters. And so I just wanted to know why you didn't elect to have it go to the ballot.
So we'll answer that in a couple different ways. I'll answer first red flag and talk a little bit about the first part of the abortion conversation. I'm going to let Senator Taft answer the second part, since the constitutional amendment was in his law and not in the House side. So first of all, when it comes to a red flag, one of the things that needs to be understood is there has to be a due process for the removal of rights. And the problem that we have with what we've seen red flag laws used in other states is this. Honestly, I think, I saw Malcolm the other day talking to himself while he was mowing the lawn. And so I'm concerned about him. And so I think, Tony, why don't you make these notes? And I know that's an absurd conversation, right? But the point is, if things were happening in those mechanisms, and instead of that individual having the opportunity to go, okay, I have the right to stand before a judge, and for them to sit there and actually have the conversation about my rights, instead rights are lost without that conversation. And that's not okay. Is suicide a problem? Yeah, it is. It really honestly is. And I think that probably the conversation of suicide, we've got hundreds of hours talking about suicide in the legislature. And if we're having a conversation about suicide, I believe that there's a lot of deep-seated issues that have brought us down the suicide road as a nation. Purpose has been lost in a lot of people's lives, and now suicide is something that we see. We've got economy, I think that goes into it. You're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, the problem that the government created will never be fixed by the government. I think we need to understand that. As far as the abortion laws and the conversation about what was brought into the Constitution, is murder healthcare? Because at the end of the day, I have a right, Article 1, Section 38 of the Wyoming Constitution, to make my own medical decisions about my body, just as every other person does. The problem is we are talking about a life that starts a heartbeat at 19 days, that starts breathing whenever they come into this world, right? The baby that at 20 some odd weeks, 24 weeks, that could come into this world with help could survive, is also a baby that could be aborted in this state. And we have to start asking that question of ourselves: is abortion health care? And should it be on a constitutional amendment or on the ballot? And that's a conversation that probably needs to continue to move forward. But at the end of the day, by no stretch of the imagination did anyone in that legislature ever comprehend the fact that we would have judges in the state of Wyoming say that murder is not. And that fundamentally is the flaw that we have here. With that, I hand it over to Senator Taft regarding the constitutional amendment.
Very good, thank you. So, suicide is an issue. I would like to go back to the education conversation. I would like to go back to the family conversation. I would like to look at a whole lot of other things involving what actually leads to that end result of suicide. Because the gun is an inanimate object. It's never hurt anybody without help. And so blaming it on a gun is not a good idea. We have to look at our society. We have to look at our education system. We have to look at our communities. When I was growing up, when I got in trouble, I knew my best friend's mom would swat me just as quick as my own mom, and I knew my mom would swat him just as quick as she would me. We were raised by a community, a tight-knit community who centralized around a certain value system that we were unwilling to compromise. And with that, we gave our children a purpose instead of a phone screen. We showed them what it was to be ambitious and to drive and to lead and to want to be more in our community and to give in service to our community. Those are the things that I see being lost in our children. We stopped teaching civics. We just opened a civics lab in the Capitol that's a phenomenal place. And I hope every school sends a classroom down there so that they can continue to put this back into our society. Those values are things that we need to look at as we move forward. How important are our children to us? Are they our future? Do we really believe they're our most important asset? And if we do, then when does that start? So we move on to murder as healthcare. And so we have one life of the mother. We have a second life that begins at 19 days. That life is unable to make a decision for itself, but constitutionally, it has a life. So are we going to protect it? Do we believe it's our most precious resource? I know tons and tons of people would love to have children. I understand things happen. 4% of the world ends up because of rape and incest. 4% of all abortions are caused by that. And I understand that a lot of people want to talk about that. Maybe that's a different conversation. I would even entertain that conversation. But abortion is not, it's not control. You made that decision. You created that life. You need to carry that life through and allow it to make its own decisions. And so when the Supreme Court made that decision, I was actually here that morning in the county commissioners meeting. And I went out to talk to A.G. Cowles, and he was just livid. He was like, they got it wrong. Your attorney general, who also preaches at my church, very much believes that we have to protect that life. And so is 126 perfect? No. Will it be challenged? Yes. Will it probably, in the big scheme, be overturned? Probably. That would be my belief. What it does, though, is it has a default setting in it that takes us back to what Wyoming always was, and not to the most liberal setting that we ended up in. And so that's the reason for 126.
Okay, both of you probably gave your longest answers of the night, but neither of you answered my question. Why not put it to a vote to the people of Wyoming, like many other states decided to do? Neither of you answered that basic question.
So that was brought up. It was in our chamber. And for whatever reason, we couldn't get the votes to put it on the ballot. For 2/3 introduction. So you have a very high bar in a budget session to get something on the floor. It takes 2/3. So it takes 21 out of 31 in the Senate to get it. I think we missed it by 2 votes.
And did you vote to put it to the electorate?
I did.
And Mayor, it never made it to us because it did make the introduction on the Senate. So the heartbeat bill started on our side, the constitutional amendment bill started on the Senate side. And just, I want to clarify something, because I think this is important to understand. I believe that from conception to natural death is life. That's something we really need to be clear, because we blur that a lot. The heartbeat bill simply said, because the original that overturned was a complete ban on abortion. The heartbeat bill says from that, when you can grab a heartbeat on, abortion is no longer legal. That's what the heartbeat bill says.
Jump in real quick. I don't have a dog in this last fight, but I do want to bring up some of the things. I mean, all 23 sheriffs in the state of Wyoming went down for this bill, the Second Amendment. And I will be the first to tell you, and I'll be the last to tell you that, folks, we are sworn to protect the Constitution. We're not going to take your guns. That being said, we all know that one person, and it's like, oh gosh, she's got a gun. And we worry about that for you. But there is a set of processes that, we have to go through, that will be going through. Shoot, I can talk to myself all the time, so if you guys want to take my guns, feel free, but, just like y'all, I'll probably have a fight with it. Yeah. That being said, kind of going with the furtherance of it, yeah, Wyoming, it's not always going to be first. We have, ever since I've been here, switched back and forth generally with Alaska between first and second suicide. For whatever reason it is, I think the gentleman here to my right, they put it, you notice the spikes, especially with the economy. When people don't feel like they can control themselves financially, then it kind of snowballs. Then there's also the mental health aspect, which I would absolutely love if I could elect or not. I would love to work with these gentlemen to my right in the future to try to help mental health in the state of Wyoming. I mean, we always talk about it. It's always in the news. Well, mental health needs this, mental health needs that. Now it's time that we actually do something. No more talk. From my side in law enforcement, which has been more than half of my life, I have seen way too many suicides. And it gets to a point where it's very disheartening. I mean, where are you at in your life that you can't reach out? Where are you at in your life that you don't feel like there's a way out? We need to make sure that people know that there are programs, and if there are not programs, by gosh, we're going to make sure programs are found. Because it's ridiculous that we are number 1 and 2 consistently. The wind drives us all nuts. I can't even tell you how much damage to my house there is this year. But there can't be more excuses. We need to move forward and help people out. So, like I said, I would love to help these folks the next couple of years. I've already been in talks with our local counseling services about what we need to do as law enforcement to try to better ourselves, better our community, better their ability to know that they're not alone. You know, PTSD, it has been such a stigma throughout past too, that don't ask for help, that's weak. Now, what's weak is killing yourself. So, please, if you feel free, my office is always open. My phone is right next to my ear all the time. Call me if you have problems. We'll work it out. Oh my gosh, don't go that way. So.
Yeah, I don't think we can stop a conversation about suicide without adding that there is a suicide and crisis lifeline. It's 988. It's just like 911. They'll call 988 if you know someone or you are feeling like you need to harm yourself. Please use 988.
That Kelly's again. I've visited with representatives and one thing or another, but we'd a great opportunity to come down to the Board of Control when we have our next meeting. It's ridiculous. I thought Dan knows we probably got better for 4 or 5 years coming in water rights, and they're still always they lead us one way and then tell us we did the wrong thing. And at the end of the day, I'm letting us move the water rights under the irrigation district anywhere in a lot of ways, and we need to have that option, otherwise it's just Nebraska. I would really like to point it out, but I don't want to, they should get paid by Nebraska if they aren't helping us.
Kelly, if you just want to make sure we know those dates, I think between Taft and I would have to do a little best to make sure one of both of us are. And I got to talk to you. I don't disagree because I got the same frustration, just giving you a little conversation that I had. So.
And I'm a Nebraskan, so there you go.
I think this probably deals with your journey and your sidekick there, probably more so. Where is, I'm a granddad now, so I'm way past the kids growing up. So where is the Pledge of Allegiance and prayer in the schools anymore? I'd like to see something, I don't know, maybe people know what's going on with that now. But I think that's an important thing for our kids that are growing up. I guess that was a question.
Very good, thank you for the question. So Pledge of Allegiance, I know in almost every school in our districts here and in Platte County, the pledge is said almost every week. And so I think we're getting there. Pride of country is something that gives all of us purpose. And so as we work to bring that back, that would be important. Prayer in school is something else that we're going to have to address. Discipline in school is something else we're going to have to address. We had bills that came up this year that were designed to allow, from the Department of Education, were designed to allow for that transformation in education so that we could get classroom management and we could get discipline back in school. Those are two things that always existed. And we've removed that out of our education. One of the things that's been proven, especially when you talk about mental health, is you put boundaries on children, they actually thrive. They do better. And they seek those boundaries. And so us in education, us as parents, us as community members, we have to be comfortable enough with ourselves, our neighbors, and our community to help each other set those boundaries and expectations moving forward. This is a really big conversation. And that's one of the exciting things about the defederalization of education and the possibility that it now exists for statewide education in the future for Wyoming. So, prayer is one of those conversations that needs to be had in school. Now, and your school boards can make a huge impact on that. Your superintendents can make a huge impact on that. I think here nobody penalizes children for praying in school as long as they do it quietly. We've seen people start to pray on the football field for sporting events, and I think that's good. We're slowly seeing that transformation. There's been no big stand taken. But local control is important. And having that conversation with your school board, your superintendent, and working that back into your community as you grow this new idea is going to be really, really important for everyone. So, I did want to make one comment. I know Jerry mentioned if I was going to run or not. When the commissioners appointed me after that, one of the questions they asked is, will you run? And I had to answer yes. And so I will run in this next election. So thank you.
One bright tidbit into, sometimes a very dark world. We talk about Pledge of Allegiance. This fall, and prior to being sheriff here, is about 5 or 6 boys were running late. And they do it when we were in high school. They put the Pledge of Allegiance on the loudspeaker. And those boys stopped. You know damn well that they were late. They stopped, put their hands over their hearts. I mean, that right there. There's your ray sunshine for the day.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out this evening. There is a lot more regarding legislative, what we did in legislature. We can't talk about all the bills, we can't talk about all the actions. There's lots of things that took place. There's lots of things that didn't make it. There's lots of things that didn't make it past the 2/3 introduction or died in the Senate. There's things that we can have more conversations about. So hit us up. Give us a phone call, 307-331-2310. It's everywhere. It's easy to remember because it's just a Google search away, right? And as long as I'm in this position, it'll be my phone number. And the day I quit, I feel sorry for the poor person that gets that phone number. But on a serious note, if you have any other questions, I do have a goldenrod, this is basically our fiscal data sheet for the state of Wyoming. This is how much money we have projected in each one of our accounts. Just so you guys are aware, we don't run cash-based budgeting in the state of Wyoming. We run budgeting on projection. Now, I don't like that. I would much prefer cash-based budgeting, but projection-based budgeting is this. We project that we are going to see this much income come into the state. We will then budget accordingly. Once we then run it out, we may not get that much money, which is why we have some buffer accounts in here, general fund and this one. We may not, and there's some others too, but those are your things. If we have more than that, congratulations, that's awesome, and we've got a windfall going into the next budget. But, so these are our 25, 26, 27, 28 projected numbers as of right now. And this was, this would have been the March 11th, last day of session. And so if you want to talk about what is in the different accounts, we can have that conversation and you can look at it. The budget is not intended to be understandable. No, I'm being serious. They try to make it where you don't understand it. And the reason being is it's a lot easier to let 4 or 5 people make the decisions financially for the state if it's so hard to understand it. No one understands the tips and the bucket drops and all of those different things. And so one of the things we're trying to do is make it more understandable and bring it into more of an understandable process so that people can follow along better. We've offered more documentation this year on the budget than we've ever done in the history of the state. We've explained how to follow along online, those types of things. One of the things that we will be doing, because I've had requests of this, I'm going to be doing a training on how to use the legislative website and follow along our committees, as well as floor sessions through our YouTube page and our legislative webpage. because you guys deserve to be able to follow. You guys should be able to watch that and go, okay, hey, Taft, why did you do that? Or Jeremy, why did you do that, right? And we deserve to be held accountable. We want to be held accountable. I want to be held accountable. If there's something you're like, that is nonsense, call me up. I want that. And then we can have the conversation. Maybe I missed something, or maybe you missed something. We didn't have that conversation because I believe that we are a lot better for the long haul. So with that, we'll continue that. But thank you guys so much. Definitely any questions, hit them up. Let's make sure you get your questions answered before the next time. Thank you guys so much.